Welcome to the show. We are now in season 3. By the time this airs, it'll be November. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of KCBC. Seriously, you all, this was just an idea that I had with a couple of other crazy people in my life. I never imagined that we would have passed, even 10 episodes, let alone 30. We're about to go into 40 now, this whole season approach, all this. So I cannot thank you all enough. Again, we, appreciate the praise online. I just encourage everybody to take that praise and just, take a couple seconds, subscribe on some of the platforms that you're on. That stuff helps tremendously. And to take that thought furthermore, all of our guests that we have on this show, we add all of their contact info, their socials, their channels, their websites, all of that, so that you can connect with them, you can engage, and you can support people, fellow business owners, fellow people in your community that are boldly following their dreams, and they all need your help too, just like I do. And so I cannot stress that enough that we're not really doing this for charity. Like this whole thing started because we want to shine a light on the people and the heroes that we know, that we live next door to, and we want to record these conversations so that hopefully somebody can be inspired in the process. All right, getting all that stuff out of the way. I am so excited to have my guests on here today. I have Becca Pratt from Literacy Evolution. Becca, so good to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much, Michael, for having me. I'm very excited. I'm a huge fan. You have interviewed some incredible business owners, so I'm just honored to be one of them now.
Absolutely. Well, I remember when we first met and we were talking about being, business owners, and we talked about how it can feel really lonely sometimes, right? Like when you're pursuing your dreams, but a lot of folks that, not to say they're not pursuing their dreams, but they're just not pursuing like the dream that you're going into. So there's the first degree of loneliness, right? And then there's that other part of like when you are trying to build your own business and a service based on your wisdom and your expertise. And you try things, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You try things that like the business coaches said were flawless and could never fail. Mm-hmm. And then it just doesn't meet the mark. And so we've talked a lot about that, like the experimentation that comes with being a business owner and trying new things. And so I've been excited ever since we talked about this. In fact, I don't know if I asked you the first time I had met you, but after I had talked to you, I was like, I'm going to have her on the show. Like we're going to figure this out. You know what I mean?
And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So I guess it's important, first off, if you could maybe describe what Literacy Evolution does, what you're doing in the space, and maybe even in Kansas City that, maybe very few are offering or others just don't do in the way that you do. And then from there, we'll get into, your experience, your origin story, conversion story, all that stuff. So if we could just start with, what is Literacy Evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. So Literacy Evolution is a new way to think about supporting struggling readers. So I currently have 2 ways that I help support the community. One is individualized tutoring instruction. I work mostly with kids with dyslexia, and I just offer my one-to-one services. And the other way that I just don't see a lot of people doing, a lot of literacy experts doing, is working with parents and giving parents the tools to be able to support their child at home, because not everybody can afford one-on-one tutoring. Not everyone has the time to take their kids to and from tutoring centers 2 or 3 times a week. And, they don't have the luxury of having money to afford that or having time to be able to do that. And so I have focused the other half of my business on supporting parents, empowering parents, giving parents the tools to be able to take 5 or 10 minutes a day to work with their kid, work with their struggling reader, and see huge gains. So there's a couple different avenues, and both are effective. It's just based on the parent's preference and what they're able to to afford time-wise, money-wise.
Absolutely. Well, I think, people who are parents will know this right away, but like it is a challenge to find time to even do the basics and the homework with the
Hmm.
kids, especially when they're little in these very, very formative years. And, just the thought of having to dive deeper on certain subjects, it can feel very paralyzing. I mean, I've told people, even when Stephanie and I were going through our years of infertility, I was like, if I ever need if my kid ever struggles with math, I'm screwed. I'm going to hire a math tutor because I am not the math guy, right?
Hmm.
It's been a long time. If you're a parent, it's been a long time since you were in grade school. It's been a long time since you had to learn how to read. And I know that there's a lot of different philosophies and approaches out there on these sorts of things. So the fact that I love how you're creating something that parents themselves can use. And I know we'll dive more into that, but maybe you could talk about some of the ways that you do help parents in helping their littles, become better readers or more adept.
Yeah. And I think it's important for parents to know that they don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know A to Z how to teach your kid to read. You don't need to know the ins and outs of all the phonics rules, all the spelling rules. And my philosophy is you can teach your child to read through play. And so the parents and the families that I work with, I do all of the data and creating the lessons behind the scenes. And I give the parents everything that they need. So all the parents need to do is print and go. You don't need to buy fancy curriculum that may or may not help your kid. You don't need to go search on Google for hours and hours to find different activities. I create all the games that I have tested with my own tutoring clients, with my own kids, and I give that to parents, and all they have to do is execute. And so we also know that struggling readers are mostly reluctant and resistant readers. And it makes sense. Our brains are mechanisms of safety. We don't want to put ourselves in situations where things are really difficult, where you see other kids around the room in the classroom. Well, reading seems really easy for them. What's wrong with me? I'm going to learn coping strategies to not draw attention to myself during reading time. And then at home, if parents are asking their kids, hey, let's sit down and work on reading homework, their kids are not going to want to do it. They're going to scream, they're going to cry, they're going to say, I need to go to the bathroom, I don't have any reading homework. They're going to pull out all of these stops, and all of that behavior makes sense. That it's nothing wrong with the kid. They are doing exactly what their brain is telling them to do by saying, this is dangerous, don't do this, do everything in your power to drift away from doing something that's really hard. And not only that, but our brains are not wired to read. Reading and writing is a pretty new evolutionary skill. And so our brains have not caught up to be wired to know how to read. And so a lot of people think reading is very natural. I didn't have a hard time learning to read, so nobody else should. And really, the research tells us that about 25% of the population, they're going to learn to read no matter what. They're just going to find a way to read. Some of us are in that lucky 25%. Other part of the population needs a very structured and systematic approach to learning to read. They need, evidence-based instruction, which we have curriculum now that takes into account the decades of research. They need very specific sequential ways to learn to read. And some schools, they don't either have the resources to have those curriculums to train teachers, or they may not know about the research yet. And so those kids who are not in that lucky 25%, if they drew the lottery and they are not also in that school that knows those approaches, then they're going to have a really hard time learning to read. And so there's so many other factors that I do want parents to know about that can help really paint the whole picture. And it's not your child just being a jerk. Honestly, a lot of parents come to me and they say, my kid isn't wanting to read with me. Like they won't sit down and read with me. And that's completely normal, completely natural. And so we also work with parents on behavior tips, mindset tips, really working on the growth mindset and how that can look with those parent-led tutoring sessions.
So cool. How much of an expert you are on this, just alone in the data there. Let me just ask you a question, like, because I think I know the answer, but I don't want to pretend like I'm even close to being knowledgeable or an expert on this, because I was one of the kids that maybe I'm one of the 25%. Like I learned how to read really quick. I did have a
Mhm.
spat, as a teenager where I hated reading. I actually didn't pick up a book from high school up until I was like 35, when like a lot of like the really cool guys like Jocko and all these guys started coming out and writing these leadership books, and for whatever reason it
Mhm.
collided. Now I love to read again, but sorry, side little squirrel there. But the question that I have is why is learning how to read as early as possible important? Yeah,
Mhm.
let's just go there. Just tell me why is it so important to learn how to read?
I teach parents to teach their kids how to read, not necessarily to teach them to love reading. Because yes, I want everyone to love reading as much as you and I love reading, but they will be functioning citizens. They will be able to get high paying jobs. They will be able to make an impact on their community, even if they don't love reading. Now, if they don't know how to read, that's going to be a lot harder. We know that it's costing us trillions of dollars to support our population who doesn't know how to read. I believe the most recent data is 54% of adults cannot read past a sixth grade level. And so that's why marketing copy for all my business owners were taught to create at a fourth grade level. Newspapers are written at a sixth grade or eighth grade level. And really, it's fascinating because of these ripple effects that are happening, because so much of our population is considered illiterate, or their literacy just stops at a certain point, and that's where a lot of the opportunities stop as well, with those jobs and the opportunities that you can get just having those literacy skills.
What I always want to do with folks that I meet that are in highly driven specialized roles like yours, you are crystal clear, razor sharp clear on your mission and how you can help, right? Like you said, like I help parents accomplish helping their kids read with play. All know kids love to play. My wife is a therapist. She knows the value. She's formally trained in play therapy. We know that if we can make things fun. I mean, my gosh, like you're in the adult learning space too, right? With learning and development and things like that. And you know that like the funner something is, the more easier people are going to adopt it and pick it up, right? So I love that. How did you get to this point in your journey, right? Like where you said, I want to build something out of this. Like maybe you can talk about your professional background, how it's led to this, what you learned along the way. We'll explore that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the first 10 years of my professional career as a classroom teacher. I mainly spent most of my time in third, fourth, and fifth grade. And so those grades, kids were expected to be proficient readers. We weren't doing phonics, we weren't doing the basics. However, I never had a class where every single one of my students was on grade level. I always had kids who were still at the kindergarten, first grade level. I had kids who were new to the country, who didn't know how to speak English. I had kids who it was their first year in formal school and they had no idea what was going on. And so classrooms all over the country today just have a wide range of literacy and of literacy knowledge with their kids. And so because of that, we there was always this kind of back and forth with teachers and parents. Parents would be wanting to know how could they help their kid at home. And as teachers, we were just instructed to basically say, well, just read more with them. Read aloud, make sure they're reading more, which is really hard for a kid who doesn't know how to read. They're not going to be able to read more at home. And it was one of those things, they're just going to catch on. One day it's going to click. They're going to know how to read. And I mean, teachers, we were told that was the way. That was the way to help parents. That was the way to help struggling readers. We had all this research, yet the schools weren't pushing for the correct curriculum. They weren't pushing for the correct teacher training. There's still so many colleges out there who their teacher training is not aligned to the science that we have. And so with all of that, I was thinking, okay, well, how can I get to these kids sooner? Because in third, fourth, and fifth grade, it's going to take years of intensive work to catch them up. So then I went and I became a reading specialist. And then I was in an elementary school where I taught K through 6. More of a small kids were identified as struggling readers based on different, tests, standardized tests, and they were given to me. And then I was able to work in small groups. And still, I was seeing that we have fifth graders, sixth graders who, again, did not have those basic literacy pieces of knowledge. They didn't have the essential skills that you need as a fifth and sixth grader. And so I was thinking, okay, well, I've done the middle school, I've done intermediate elementary, I've done starting at kindergarten. What about if I start with parents? Because parents are desperate. They want to help their kids learn to read. They have no idea how. And a lot of parents assume that they're going to send their kids to school, their kids are going to learn to read, and that's that. Where the reality is that is not the case for the majority of the population. And so that's where my passion with figuring out how to empower parents to work with their kids at home. And really a lot of that is play. And with my own tutoring sessions, I focus on play. Kids learn the best, like you said, through play. Even adults learn through play, even though we forget it sometimes. And so all of those strategies that I've learned over my years and years of tutoring, I now teach parents. And parents have a really unique opportunity because they're with their kids so much outside. They're either driving their kids all over to school, they're going to sports practices. That time may not be sitting around the dining room table, but there are so many opportunities that parents do have in the car, real quick before dinner, while they're eating breakfast, those little snippets that they can absolutely utilize to help their child learn to read. It doesn't have to be a big formal, let's sit down and I'm going to talk at you for an hour and then we're going to do a worksheet. That's not how it is, and that's not how our brains like to learn. So I just taken all of that and brought it to the parents and made it very manageable for parents to utilize those same strategies that work with my one-on-one tutoring sessions.
That was so cool. And just curious too, when you decided to focus on the parents, were you a parent yet?
I was a new parent. Yes.
Okay.
I just have
All right.
a little baby girl,
Little
and
baby girl.
yes, and that is what really kickstarted because as a teacher, it was really easy to say, like, these parents they just don't know what's going on. Why don't they just do this? And then when you do become a parent, you're like, they are sending their most precious person to school where these teachers are, we're helping to shape their minds. That's a huge responsibility. And so then I thought, well, if I'm not in the classroom anymore, I'm a parent. So now I can really connect with that population. So yes, I was a brand new baby parent who thought I knew everything, but
Yeah,
I didn't.
absolutely. Hey, me too. Me too, my friend. So I'm just so curious about can you share some breakthroughs? I'd love to hear about maybe some specific breakthroughs that you've gotten to witness since you've embarked on this journey. And then we can maybe talk about like what you've learned of being a parent using your own material, because that's what I love too, is like your Instagram. You also have a TikTok channel. We're gonna link all of that
Yeah.
stuff. What kind of breakthroughs have you seen with the kids?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to top of mind. The first was from a few years ago, and single mom working her tail off. She has an awesome second grader, and he had just been diagnosed with dyslexia. And the mom also has dyslexia. And as a side note, we do know that dyslexia runs in families. So if you're a parent who had a hard time learning to read, it could be genetically passed down to your child. Not to scare you, there are lots of things that we can do, but that is good for parents to know too, of kid having a hard time reading. If the parent had a hard time, we know that kids are just more, they may have a harder time reading. But I was working with a second grader, just got diagnosed with dyslexia, and the mom was saying he's having a really hard time with the speed of second grade because he hadn't mastered all of the things that you have to master before: letter names, letter sounds, blending, all of those things he just hadn't mastered. And second grade is starting to move a little faster. And so she really wanted to be proactive. And so I worked with him for about 10 months, and the mom would sit at the table with me. And so she would see all of the strategies that I was using, all of the games that we were playing, and he grew 2 grade levels in 10 months. not just from me, but from this relationship that the mom was learning from me. She was watching these strategies. She was then taking those strategies and using them at home. And she was adamant about getting her kid to read. And he's doing amazing now. I think he's in fourth or fifth grade. He's just rocking it at the top of his class. And I think that's so special that she had a hard time reading. She was worried for her child, but she was not letting anything get in the way of his literacy journey. And so she was willing to be uncomfortable. She was willing to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I'm going to watch you. And then she was willing to try that on her own and ask questions like, hey, did I do this right? And look at him now. He's doing great. Another parent
Amazing.
came to me and he had not gone to kindergarten yet. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some social media parenting influencers. They may not be the best people to listen to for this reason, but she could tell that her son was really having a hard time with the alphabet. He was being resistant. He just didn't want to do anything with reading. And so he and his mom, sometimes his dad, also came to watch these lessons. I, created the games and then I let them play together and I kind of stepped out. So it's that slow introduction of here is this, now try it. You have an expert right here to tell you and to coach you along the side. But it was really fun to see them having fun with reading. And he went to kindergarten knowing how to read. He's now doing amazing in kindergarten. His parents are just amazed at the fact that he loves to read. And just the fact that you can take a reluctant, resistant learner and create this environment that makes it okay to make mistakes. It's okay to do hard things because we can do hard things. We can do hard things together. And just having parents create that environment, it's just really cool to see parents become empowered to say, hey, I can do this. I can teach my kid to read because parents teach kids things all of the time. And reading is just another one of those things that can be added to the list.
Absolutely. And I would imagine, I'm just visualizing it, thinking about where that goes, like the confidence that that would build with parents in every other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing I could probably anticipate that some of the parents that you've worked with, they have taken the lesson of giving reading lessons to their children and they've said, I remember that time when I didn't know how to help, John or whomever read. I'm going to take an approach right now with, maybe math, maybe some other subject, maybe going outside of school, like, how to do more things around the house. you know so often I think parents, like especially when the kids are little, we get into this like it's too hard to have them do this, so I'm going to do it for them.
Exactly.
Like
Yes.
think about like having them wipe down the tables. It's like, what,
Mm-hmm.
like they're going to have to be terrible at wiping down the tables before they can get really good. They're going to have to be terrible with a broom before they learn how to actually do that, fix it. So it's like I can just imagine that there's a lot that then starts to transfer in with parents. What have you learned since now you've got your littles, and I think you said one of your children read her first word the other night, like,
Yes.
like can you tell us about what you've learned? Like I was like, hey, when I read that too, I was like, yay, that is amazing. I shared it with Stephanie and she's like, what, seriously, wow. And it was like so simple. I'm not going to steal your thunder. You tell us what you've learned about being a parent and then also focusing on this with your kids. We'll just talk about that.
So if you are in the parenting world, like on Instagram or TikTok, there are going to be some very loud influencers who are going to say, you don't need to teach a kid their letters and their numbers before kindergarten. They just need to know their name and how to be kind. And yes, those things are important, but we know that if they don't know their letters, their letter names and sounds by the end of first grade, they're probably not going to catch up in reading. That's going to set them up for a lifetime of really difficult reading experiences. And so you can absolutely teach your kid through play. And so I have the luxury of time right now. I have a 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. And so I have the luxury of time, taking my time, creating games, creating this experience for my kids where we talk about letters and names, and letters spell sounds, and that's how we read in our books. Yes, we do a lot of read alouds, but reading aloud to your kid is not going to be the only way to get your kids to read. It's building their vocabulary. They can hear fluent reading, but reading aloud to your kid is not going to teach your kid to read. And so I have been very insistent on saying, hey, do you want to come play a letter game with me? And my husband and I would, be sitting on the ground, and it was just an invitation. It's not a come here and sit down. We're going to work. We're going to learn how to do this. It's very much like, hey, we're doing this if you want to join us. And that nonchalant way of approaching learning, and especially reading, is very, very helpful, at least for my family. And, we create games where we hop around the room and hop on different letters and say the name and say the sound as we hop on it. And we have this jar of beans. And so I put beans on a baking dish, and we write letters through the beans. I don't know. It sounds really weird. It's really fun for kids. And we say the sound. And so they have to know their sounds in order to learn how to blend those sounds together. So they don't need to know all 26 letters and letter sounds before they start blending together. So we've talked about very minimal sounds. I think she has mastered 6 sounds. And with those 6 sounds, I was able to put them together. Then I put an I and a T on the board, and I said, this is how we blend sounds together to read words. It, and then we say it faster. It. And so then I put 2 letters again, and I modeled it for her, and I modeled it for her quite a few times. Parents, a lot of times we get stuck in, well, I've shown you once, you should be able to do it. And so I like to empower parents, like, you're going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting at first. That is okay. It doesn't mean your child isn't, learning how to do this. They just want to see how it's done and then do it together. So then I showed her the I and the T again, and I said, let's do this together. It. And she was like, hey, I read a word. And then we, did a dance, and she got to go tell my husband all about it. And it's a bonding experience for us to be able to say, I am teaching her the most fundamental and important skill that she can possibly have in life. So it's so fun to be able to see your child and get them at the ground floor and build this person who has all of these experiences, and then also say, yeah, I taught them to read. It's just cool. It's really cool.
It's amazing. Just thinking about it, I can anticipate, parents out there, and you and I have talked about this. Actually, I caught myself talking to you one time, and I said, wait a minute, I did have time.
Mm-hmm.
I did not make time. But I anticipate the resistance is, again, because people envision this as a production. And, you talked about it. You referenced, like, it's not an hour-long sit-down, like some kind of ritual that we do. They're already resistant. If you set it up like that, they're going to be even more like, oh, my gosh, I'm going to this hour-long. Almost like, people who are afraid of dentists almost. It's like they're afraid to walk in a dentist's office. They're afraid to go to the kitchen table to have mommy and daddy force me to try and learn how to read for an hour. Mm-hmm. But I can imagine people, all that long-winded way to say, like, but how do I make time to do this? How do I have the time? Like, how much time are you spending with your kids, and what's the time commitment usually when you're working with parents? What does that look like?
So it kind of varies depending on kids. So my daughter right now, if it's something that she's really interested in, we can do a game for 15 or 20 minutes. If it's not, if it's something like, oh, I'm tired of this, it may be a minute or 2, and that has to be fine. But again, I have the luxury of time. She's only 3. She'll be 4 in like a week and a half. I got to get used to saying that. But for parents who maybe don't have that luxury of time, they're already in school, they're already struggling with reading, there are lots of games that you can do in the car. You don't need letters or words in front of you. And it's something called phonological awareness. And because, like I said earlier, reading is not natural, talking is. So unless you have really severe developmental delays, talking is really natural for people. That's how we've passed down stories throughout time. And so the brain connects sounds to letters. And so if you're in the car driving to soccer practice, you can do some of these games. And I give these parents games like, here are 5
questions that you can ask in the car that will build your child's phonological awareness that then translates to reading, because that is the biggest gap that I've seen in all of my years of teaching is kids' phonological awareness is weak. And so once we fix that, once we help close that gap, their reading takes off. So I like to surprise parents by saying like, hey, you can do these games in the car, really simple, very effective. And you will see your child's reading take off if you really work on this for a few minutes a day.
That is so cool. I love it. I had a feeling like some efficiency hack was going to come in there somehow, right? Because you absolutely have to. So often, I think we don't make time for things that we know we need to do or we should do because we perceive it as like extra on top of what we're already doing. But if it's integrated into a car ride, just like we all, like a lot of us, I have friends too. They say like, I do audiobooks. I don't do actual books. Like and it's like, okay, the convenience of that and podcasts and things is like, you can listen to it in the car. You can listen to it while you're working out. You can listen to it while you're mowing the lawn or, doing crafts or like going on a walk or whatever. And so I think integrating these principles and again, like I love how you said there's games you can play in the car, right? That's just so cool. Very curious. This kind of just came up in my mind, and I know we had talked about like the idea of networking, and we kind of started off talking about how it's a lonely road being an entrepreneur, and somebody who's super passionate about a subject. You want everybody to be as excited as you are about it sometimes, right? And when I say you, I mean all of us. We generally want people to be excited about what we're doing because we see the importance. How have you found your people and who's in your tribe, right? Because you need to look to other people sometimes when you don't know how to do something or, we could talk about that in business or your teaching approach or whatever. Like, how do you network?
So I originally, when you were saying it, I'm like, I don't have a specific tribe, but that's not true. It's not a formal like, hey, us business people are going to go to the coffee shop and sit down and strategize. It's not that, but I have a lot of pockets of people who are either supportive of my work, maybe teachers I've worked with in the past that are sharing my stuff and saying, hey, I'm going to send this person your way because they have a question that maybe I can't answer, or I think you would be a great fit for this parent or this child. So there's a lot of those pockets. The Instagram community.
Sometimes it's the same damn thing, right? I love that slip there. That was great. That was so good. All right. The Instagram community. Yes.
Yes. I have met some really cool educators and people who are trying to do the same thing as me. And it's a very small pocket of people who are targeting parents and wanting to give parents specific tools. A lot of the people in the education space are working with teachers, which is great, but I don't want parents to have to go to those places and get a lot of stuff that maybe they don't need. They don't need whole classroom management techniques. They really don't even need to know the science behind how the brain learns to read. They need to know what they can do with this pocket of time for their specific child. And so that's what I found with other people who are doing the same work to make it a little less lonely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is so important. Like having people that see what you're doing, and then people that are in your niche or space that are maybe inspired by what you're doing and you're also inspired by what they're doing. Such a big deal. So, talking about the ways like making it easier for people to access what you're doing with Literacy Evolution. What has that journey been like? Very, very curious to know about, because I know you've got your website, you got your social presences. How has that evolved over time? And what are some lessons that you've learned and how to make it easier to engage with you and get your tools and your services out to people?
As you know, as a business owner, it is quite a journey. People just say, you're really good at this. You should start a business. You really like to do this. Why don't you sell that? It's really easy to say, and it's really easy to start a business. It is not easy to grow it and to make something of it, because when you're a baby business owner, you have your skills, the thing that you know how to do that you're trying to market, but you don't have the business skills. And those are two very different, in most niches, two very different skill sets. And so you have to be patient. And I told myself it is okay to go at turtle speed. I'm going at turtle speed now. I know that I'm going to be able to help lots of parents in my lifetime of doing this. And I'm sure you follow a lot of business Instagram profiles, and
I've noticed that you and I follow a lot of the same ones, actually.
Yes. Here's how you make $50,000 in a day. Here's what you can do. This is dead. Do this. And there's so much noise out there. And I have had to spend the last 2 years of my business drowning that out and staying laser focused. And I have not been perfect at it. For the first year, I've been like, well, I could do this. So let me try to put this out there. Okay, that didn't go as well. Let me try to put this out there. Oh, that went well. Let me try to do this. And there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of, oh, I could do this, and it can make a really big impact. But I've very slowly grown on social media, and likes and comments and follows do not pay the bills. So I've had to really shed that thought of, well, if I just get more followers, then it's going to be okay. Then I'm going to be able to impact more people. So I spent the first 2 years just doing social media organic growth, and it was painfully slow. And I've really had to lean on my community to, reaching out saying, hey, does anyone have a kid who's struggling with reading? I can help. A really slow process. And then I embraced the ad space, and putting out ads in the first 2 days doubled my email list. So I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? There was so much fear behind, taking a chance on ads. And so now I've got this different strategy that I developed very recently. I know we were talking the other day,
Yeah.
I've been going at turtle speed, which is I'm still okay with that, but I got to find a way to impact more people, because my time now is more valuable than my money. So if I have to pay for ad space, for getting put in front of my ideal audience, I will do that if it saves me years of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's huge. And I remember you talking about that breakthrough. Was it Facebook ads?
Yes. Yeah.
That was the one that you used and leveraged.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I haven't pulled the trigger on yet either. Like, I get encouraged to, like, for the podcast and for VAS, I get encouraged, like, make this reel an ad, make that, and I go, you know what? My call to action isn't strong enough yet, or my website is, well, actually I let my website expire because WordPress was just garbage for me, and I've got to rebuild, right? There's some things, but I also too am realizing that I'm starting to paralyze myself because, what is it? Done is better than perfect, or there's all kinds of analogies about, like, just going and doing, and then obviously experimenting with what works and doesn't. And I just so appreciate that too, because that's the thing that I've gathered about you and your approach with what you're doing, is that you truly are a learner. And I think you embrace those new things, and you're not too proud to try, something that, you think might work. You also too, I think it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're really quick to change. If something doesn't work, I think my perception is that you are able to look and say, okay, here's what I think why, and I'm going to stop doing that. Like when you said my time is more valuable, like that is a revelation that can only come through wasting a crap ton of your time doing things that aren't fulfilling you or helping your business grow, right?
Yep,
like
absolutely.
Only the ones who have gone through that fire will take that approach, right? To be able to articulate it. That's the thing. It's like, it's one way to experience it, one thing to experience it, but then when you're able to just concisely say, like, I'm happy to pay for an ad instead of what'd you say, 9 years, right? The fact too that you've also crossed the 2-year threshold and you have not given up, right? Like you're still pushing into this and leaning in, because God knows that thought, sometimes it comes every day, right?
Yep.
You just, you think like, why am I doing this? You go through these things, does anybody really care? And when I start to boil those things down, I go, yeah, I can think of people who care. And I go, yeah, Stephanie cares, Phil cares, Becca cares, Cam cares, Hallie cares, like all these people that I've met, it's like, okay, yeah, like if I stopped doing this right now, I don't know that I would find something else that's better to fill that time. And some days that's what kind of keeps me going almost. I know I'm going down a tangent here. And maybe let me ask you this. What keeps you going?
That's a good question. The first reason is I'm stubborn as hell and I don't give up easily. And for
Hell
better or
no.
for worse, some things I'm like, why did I spend so much time on that? But I'm stubborn. I know the work is important. So there have been so many times that I'm like, well, let's just shut it down. Nobody's listening. If, I can save face because it won't be as public as if, I'm bigger and my business is bigger and I shut it down then. Like there's so many times in the past few years when I had a new baby, my second baby, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just take this as a graceful exit. The work is too important. I wish that more people were talking about the literacy crisis that is in the United States right now. And not a lot of people are. And so if they're not talking about it, I have to. I don't want so many kids and parents to feel like failures because they think that something is fundamentally wrong with them, or I'm not smart enough to learn to read. That's, I'm just destined to not have those opportunities. And that is just not true. And so I am doing everything in my power right now to, even if my audience is small, that's okay. Those people are important to me because I can still make an impact on a small community. Another thing that I do is I think back to when I was a baby business owner and who I didn't know. I had all the dreams in the world. Like this influencer said it was going to be really easy to build this business into 9 figures in 10 months. So I'll be able to do that. And knowing how far I've come, not only just my business skills, my teaching skills, but also my mindset and how much more mentally tough I am now. I am so proud of how far I've come. And so that gets me going more than look at all these business people who are doing great things. Maybe that could be me someday. To my past self is really proud of me right now. So I'm not going to give up on her. I'm not going to give up on all these kids who are still out there thinking that they are less than because reading is not easy for them.
That is the sound of an advocate that I think every parent with a struggling reader wants to have in their corner. Damn. That is so cool. That is so cool. I'm thinking about it too. 2 weekends ago, you were on the local news, right? Was that KCT? How did that feel?
That was a wild experience. It was wild. It was so cool because I had met Kelly Peltier at a literacy event probably 6 or 7 months ago, and we had connected. We sat at the same table. She's like, hey, if you ever want to, come on the news, here's my card. And I put it off for so long. I'm like, I don't know if I have enough to say. And, just all those limiting beliefs. And so finally I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm never going to be ready. Let's just do it. So I contacted her. She gets me on, and I didn't even know if it was going to be live or recorded until the morning of. It was this whirlwind experience of being able to share my passion, kind of like what I'm able to do now. So I'm so thankful for you and for all these other outlets where these small business owners can really share things. And it was a really cool experience to think like, I can't see these people who are watching. My daughter was also frustrated that I wasn't talking back to her because she was like yelling mommy at the screen and I wasn't saying anything back. And just knowing that there's parents out there, even if it was one parent, even if one parent was like, hey, there is hope. I can do this. Someone can help me. That's all I need.
Absolutely. Because that's part of your impact. 1 parent, 2 parents, 3 parents, 5 parents. Let me ask you this. So what do you think like the next year looks like for Literacy Evolution? Like what's in focus for you? Obviously the holidays are coming up. Usually I imagine that's kind of slow for every business. And, we're all kind of like thinking about like, what did we accomplish this year? What are we going into next year? What's going to be important for you?
That's a great question. I have been trying to figure that out. And I think my strategy for the next year and my goal for myself would be continue doing the things that make a difference and not going squirrel brain like many of us entrepreneurs do again, staying focused, continuing offering tutoring services, but also offering the Family Reading Academy, which is that parent side of things throughout the year. And I've seen a lot of things with that pick up because of conference time. And so parents may be hearing for the first time, hey, your kid's really struggling with this. And parents are panicking right now. And so that's where I come in. Don't panic. I got you. It's okay. We're gonna have your kid learning to read. So I think staying focused and helping those parents one-on-one, it may evolve into more of a group, like a parent community. I could see that happening in the next few years. Right now, I just want to continue to do the things that I know are working, the things that I know that I have the bandwidth for with this time in my life. I would love to, in the next year, go into schools and have, live parent workshops where I give parents really actionable things to do, things to take home with them so they can, work with their child. And that really lifts the burden off of the teachers as well. Because teachers only have so much time. Some teachers have 25, 30 kids in their room, and they cannot possibly cater to the one-on-one needs of kids and parents. And so I would love to be able to partner with schools to really help teachers with that effort of teaching those kids and really helping those parents.
My goodness. Yeah, I'm envisioning that right now. Like, I'm actually picturing you going out to, some of the local school districts that we have here. I picture you needing help doing that, like scaling and
Yes.
having like contractors come on board and, the opportunities. That's the other thing that I think is exciting for you and in your space too, coming from, public education background, right? Going into like, hey, this is the niche. This is what I want to focus on. I can totally see that for you. And I'm sure, most of the folks in your circle probably see that as well, right? Like, because when you talk about it, like, this isn't just a hobby for you. Like, I can tell, like, it really, you eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff,
I do.
That is so, so cool. Is there anything unique here in the Kansas City region that you think is important for people to know? Being here, knowing, the challenges that learners have. Is there anything that you think is unique and maybe something that gives us like an advantage in a way for Kansas City readers and learners?
That's an interesting question. I think Kansas City is unique because it's pretty large, but it still feels small. And I don't think all big cities have that luxury, or medium-sized cities. Kansas City is so unique just with the community aspect. And everyone is so kind. Everyone is so kind here. And so I can see if we leverage this Kansas City community that we've had, that you've built this great Kansas City business community. If we do something like that in terms of this literacy evolution that we can have, I don't know, maybe something's there.
I think something is. I really do. You made a really good point. Something that I've talked about with some previous guests is we've talked about doing like Kansas City Business Con, right? Or KCB Con.
Uh-huh.
I've also talked with some fellow podcasters. I'm going to be coming on to a couple of shows coming up December or January probably, where, we'll talk about like, just stuff happening in Kansas City and like what led me to Kansas City. Cause I'm a California born and raised, and we're about to reach like 10 years here, but we have talked about this. Some of our guests have also offered to open up their space for something maybe in the future, and where we would try to do something like that. And again, I have to say this. I know that, we're not the only Kansas City business podcast. We're not the only sort of group, but I was telling you, one of our friends the other day, like, I have people on this show that I see are doing good, meaningful, purposeful work that I appreciate. And that's, some of them is like, I would hire them to do what they do for my own family. Right.
Yeah.
And so it brings up this larger topic. I told a guest recently that I thought every business owner should have their own, or business should have their own podcast. I don't think every business owner should be a podcaster, but I feel like there is an opportunity to educate and connect with others in their space that only this type of media can accomplish. Okay. we know now too, like in technology, like you can leverage all this stuff, video conferencing. I know you have virtual tools, PDFs that you can send out to people as well. But I do feel like in Kansas City, back to the original point of what you were going on, we can create a group for literally anything. And I'm pretty sure there are more groups in Kansas City than some other cities could even dream to have, because they're so big and clunky and people are so decentralized. And like, if you look at it, like Kansas City, there's like communities for, vintage clothes. There's communities for art. There's communities for musicians. There's poetry
Magic the
communities.
Gathering. My husband is part of the Magic the Gathering community. It's
Are you
great for him.
serious?
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes, it's
Like,
so cool.
I mean, and that's the thing, like there's literally a group for everything. And I think that's something that my observation coming from the coast and also traveling all over the country is that in the Midwest, it's like when we find something that we love, like let's just like make a group or a place for people to meet and do this. And so, yeah, maybe that is something in the next year. I totally see you as somebody who could spearhead that kind of thing and find some other trusted advisors and get that going. The other thing in our previous conversations, I just have to say, just from a side note, that I was very interested to hear is that you are not an extrovert.
I'm not, no.
You're not an extrovert, okay? And like we've talked a little bit about that, like how, you can be perceived as one, but like tell us how that's been with like networking with other people and some of the breakthroughs I think maybe you've had on your own. I don't want to say overcome not being an extrovert, but like overcome the hesitancy or the reluctance to network or do public speaking or do a podcast interview. Like, how'd you do that?
So I think for me, there are two different skills. So we have this public speaking and teaching, which I feel completely comfortable with because I spent so much of my formative professional years just being a public speaker all day, every day to a classroom full of kids.
That's right. Yeah.
I've always kind of naturally gravitated towards public speaking, and that's just something that I enjoy doing. So that part I don't really tie to being extroverted or introverted, but definitely the networking piece. And I've had to work on my mindset quite a bit around that. I've been to a handful of networking events, and every single one of them have turned out great. And so now I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go here. I got to get my mind right. If I can connect with one person and help them in some way, that's a success. I don't need to go and meet all 400 people in this room. And I know that I'm going to be exhausted after that. And I just have to be okay with it. So I set my schedule up as, maybe I have a few hours of downtime where I read or just be for a little bit. So I think, and I love this question because it ties back beautifully to my mission, and parents know their kids more than anyone else. They know their kids in and out. And so what's going to motivate them, what's going to work for them and what's not. And so I really help parents take that knowledge of their kids and translate that into expanding on their strengths and really helping them with their challenges when they're working with them to learn to read.
Absolutely. And I've heard you say that in your content before too, and messaging like on Instagram, like parents, if you're told things are going to be okay, but you don't feel assurance from that, you got to go with your gut on that.
Yes.
Because
parent intuition is everything.
That instinct is so real. It is so real. And, Stephanie and I have both seen moments where, in all kinds of walks of life, where with our kid, it was like we knew what they needed. And even when we felt like the world was telling us we were wrong, right? I won't get specific on that, but like, if we just break down like, kids and the way they learn and their diets, and when they tell you like they don't like doing something, not dismissing that.
Yes.
Like actually saying like, no, you know what? They're actually the world's best. Kids are kind of like the world's best investigators and best psychologists in a way. Like they're in tune with their feelings more so than we are. Like
Absolutely.
A lot of people, as we get older, we just become like, if not dead inside, we just become like our emotions. Like we're not like,
yes.
We're just like, you get so used to like life and just certain things and all that, like, we've got these kids that like their emotional barometer is like, it is dialed in. It's locked in. It's not ruined by the world yet, right?
Yes,
I'm
they
getting a
are a
little dark
lot
there.
smarter than we give them credit for.
They are, and that whole well, I always think about more as caught than taught, because I think that comes up a lot with parenting.
Yeah.
But just on the subject of like trusting like the parent intuition, that's just huge. And I love how you honor that too. Is there anything that we didn't discuss or that's come up as you've been thinking about this that you feel is just paramount to kind of get out there and tell our listeners?
I think my final thought is just parents are the best teachers for their kids. Parent-led tutoring is probably the most efficient and effective way to get your kid reading on grade level. You have so many opportunities to work with your kid and to reinforce those literacy skills. And especially if you can work with them one-on-one. If you have other kids, it's a little more difficult. And so I work with parents to really make a plan for that one-on-one time, because that is what we see is the most effective. Obviously, when you are one-on-one with something and all of your attention is there, that is where the real learning happens. That's where the quickest and the most effective learning happens, rather than in a large group. And our schools they're overcrowded. No fault of the teachers, no fault of the parents. It's just how they are. Our system is definitely shifting. And I think people understand that the school system is not set up for the success of everyone. It's set up for the success of the neurotypical kids who are growing how they should. It's not set up for the kids who are gifted. It's not set up for the kids who are slower learners and who really need a lot more time. And so I think that everyone knows that this is a thing, but it's kind of like, well, what do I do with my kid who may not be on that trajectory? And so that's where we come in.
I love it. How can people engage with you? What's the best way to engage right now, especially like going into the winter? What special opportunities are you offering? What's the best way to interact with Literacy Evolution?
Yeah, so I am most active on Instagram, Becca Pratt _teach. So you can always shoot me a DM. I love answering questions. I'm about to open the doors. Let's see it. When this is aired, the doors will probably open to my Family Reading Academy, which is where I invite parents to work with me one-on-one, and we really make an individualized plan. And I send you those specific games and activities for your child straight to your inbox. So that's going to be open. And then I always am available to talk about tutoring. I have currently one spot open, and so I love to just see if that would be a good fit as well. But yes, the holidays are coming up. Parents want to make sure their kid's on track for that halfway point of the year, and also to not lose the sense of wonder and fun that come with the holidays. And so I think that play-based learning is the best of both worlds.
So awesome talking to you, Becca. So grateful that you're doing this in our region. It's incredible work. Gosh, it's been so cool having you on the show. Everybody,
thank you so much, Michael. This was awesome.
Yeah, isn't it cool? Doesn't it feel good talking about what you're doing and spreading the word? What an honor that we get to have these kinds of opportunities.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So you heard it from Becca herself. We'll have all of her links and everything in the show notes. Be expecting all these social media blitzes. Again, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And then we stream on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Thank you all for listening. We thoroughly appreciate your support.